Welcome to Gender Meowster Podcast Network. Genderful is a talk show featuring non-binary and trans folks discussing various topics and special interests. We kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of identities. All opinions are the speaker's own. This show airs live on Twitch at twitch.tv/gendermeowster, and VODs with show notes can also be found on YouTube. Meowdy folks, and welcome to episode 8 of Genderful with Gender Meowster. I'm Gender Meowster, your host, and I use they, them pronouns. With me tonight, not only is Neferkitty, the cuddly, but we have three plural systems joining us tonight to talk about plurality and gender. I wanted to give you all a heads up that we have some possible content warnings for this stream. This is the second half of the night, so it is going to be a bit more intimate in terms of people's actual stories. Can I trade you this cat for that? Thank you. Let me close the door. Thanks, honey. It's going to be a bit more. We're going to talk about heavier stuff. That's the short version. So possible content warnings include childhood trauma, discussions of childhood trauma, sexuality, mental health, discussions of transphobia, homophobia, ableism, light references to kink, and possible references to suicidal ideation, self-harm, and car crash. I believe also PTSD might come up. These are just some of the things that might happen. There could be even more things. At any point, you can do !CW in the chat to get those content warnings again. Maybe not. But they are being posted approximately every 3 to 7 minutes. One of those intervals is the quantity. So this is also, since this is a new episode, this is also a fundraiser for Elle, who's seeking feminization surgery. You can donate with the link that's being posted periodically in the chat. And we appreciate all of your support. We've already hit over $8,000 for our goal, and the end goal is $13,000, and that would allow Elle to have facial feminization surgery, which is extra great because your face is the first thing you see in the morning, and so to not have the dysphoria that comes with seeing your face and have it not look how you expect would be wonderful. So without further ado, I'm going to just see if our guests are ready to switch. I'm going to do a thumbs up. Are y'all ready? Waiting to see them see me. Thumbs. All right, we're going to do a switch. All right. Hello, guests. Welcome back.
Hey.
Hooray.
It's good to be back.
You're here. Thank you so much thanks for coming on and doing 2 episodes in one day. This is incredible. I love it so much. So really,
it's convenient.
Really briefly, let's have you all do again names and pronouns and any other brief but relevant piece of information you'd like to share, and then we're going to dig more into some biography pieces and also more specifically the topics of gender and plurality. So we'll do left to right, top to bottom. So we'll have Elle go, and then Ian Lain, and then prismatic system.
Hi. It says Elle there. That's at the start of the prior episode. That's what we're going with. Is the name of our system in a sense. Right now it's Liz. We switched right near the end of the last episode.
Hi, Liz.
I use she, it pronouns, and M might make a appearance at some point throughout this, but we are a sort of 2-person system, 2.5. It's she, her, a non-binary woman. We've got me, Liz, she, it, binary as much as there is such a thing, woman, and then Elle, which is sort of like you think of Steven Universe fusion type stuff, a blend, a Gestalt blend of the two of us that is more than the sum of her parts. We help with a lot of different Discord communities and modding, in some degree for livelihood, some not. We're neurodivergent, we're trans, ADHD, ASD, disabled, etc. Yeah, I think that's about it for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Next, we have Ian and Lain.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Ian. I'm a game developer, and I've been aware of being plural for about half a year or so. Um, I'm also trans non-binary, and my headmate Lain is trans feminine. Um, I use they and it pronouns, and we talked a little bit about the its pronoun set on the last episode, if you're interested in that. And Lain uses uh Lain uses she and they pronouns.
Awesome. And next, we have prismatic system.
Yeah, hi. That's me. Or us rather. I'm Harley Mist. I use she and they pronouns. I have two headmates, M and Alexia. M uses she and they pronouns, and Alexia uses she and her pronouns. And I am just gonna switch out to M now because yeah, I talked through all of the last episode.
Bye, Harley.
Hi, I'm M. Nice to meet all of you.
Hi, Em. Welcome in.
Hey.
Yeah,
Fancy seeing you here.
If I wind up switching too, we'll have an M&M thing going there.
Hey. I love it. Awesome. Okay. I think the next most potent question is how did you discover or become aware of your plurality? What was part of that story? And I think part of the content warnings is because with this biography piece, we may get into personal traumas and things. So just so the audience knows, this is the bit we've been warning you about. But the mature label is on the stream, and yeah, please share about your experiences. I don't know what order you all would like to go in. I'm seeing hand gestures that I don't know what they mean.
We were trying to figure out who would go first. I'll
Cute.
go ahead and go. There were no other hands up.
Awesome.
So it ties a little bit into our transness too, which probably won't be a surprise to a lot of people. Existing as a trans person in this world is trauma. And not all plural systems are the result of trauma, to be clear. But in our case, at the very least, it played a pretty major part, we believe. We aren't entirely sure where the split happened or whatever you want to call it, but our best guess is that it was probably around the onset of puberty. Our family life was getting a lot worse with regard to verbal and emotional abuse, things like that. And it was the onset of puberty, which should say a lot right there. As a trans girl in a world that was even more unaccepting of it than now, without the language to describe it, without people to look to explain it. And also our chronic health conditions set in then as well. One major event we can think of is, we were as many autistic people are called, overly sensitive, so to speak. That got drilled into us a lot, and our dad would yell at us, when we'd cry and we'd cry more, and that was sort of a cycle, a loop. Until finally, we largely just sort of stopped crying. We think it was probably around then. And that was the the main front from then for a very, very long time, that she sort of took over, and that I was either in the background or barely around. It took us until we were, 25, 26 to realize we were trans once we'd sort of gotten away from the primary abusive elements, worked through those, peeled back the layers. You can think of Shrek like the onion. And yeah, we figured that out a few days after Trump was elected. That wasn't great. Well, I'm sorry. Year before that, we started hormones around then. Went through transition, largely M. She sort of took on the brunt of the world and weathered that, which is, we believe, in a way that there are some parallels to the prismatic gals. Uh, why she's so much more worn out now, and I'm the one that's much more bubbly and all of those things, because M was the one that went through transition and handled all of that to the best of our knowledge. And it wasn't until early last year, late the year before, that we started coming into contact with the concept of plurality. And it piqued our interest in a way that, looking back on it, the same way that being trans did, um, it interested us, and we were a good ally and all of that. But as we met more and more plural systems personally, that continued on. And in summer of last year, in a Discord server we were in, we saw someone talking about being plural is a lot like being trans. If you hang out with a lot of people that are, and you've considered it somewhat consistently, and maybe it gnaws at you some, there's a decent chance. So, as it was a few months before, a couple of people we knew had said they got plural vibes from us, and we then asked them the next day, "What did you mean by that?" And they're like, "I'm sorry, I don't remember." That wasn't very helpful. Apparently, one night when we were very tired around that same time, we said we thought we might be to someone, but probably not. Um, but yeah, that night, just sort of reached out, probed, and found me. And we had some degree of dialogue the way that we can when we're very intentional with it. And slowly figured it out. Persist that uh, Harley had mentioned during the prior episode was amazing. We talked with her for, I don't know, 6 hours or so. She was immensely patient. And interestingly, through the process of figuring ourselves out, cementing that more, figuring ourselves out more, talking to our friends about it that we felt that we could, the ones that were the most receptive, coming out to some degree on the couple of Discord servers that we spent the most time on, it turned out that we incidentally cracked a lot of other plural eggs. One of those happening to be Ian and Lain. Not solely, of course, it was not just us, but we certainly played a reasonably large part. That they'll talk about. I don't want to take too much credit, but it definitely was a thing that was, it was nice in that way, and seeing all those other people. Uh, yeah, I think I'll leave it there. There's more to say on other topics later.
Awesome. Who else would like to do sort of the biography question?
Yeah, I can go next for sure. I As goes back quite a way. In that when we were going through early transition, we started to get back a lot of repressed memories um, about moments in our life where we'd effectively figured out that we were trans before and had just like locked that up, been like, okay, well, that's not um, a thing that we can do anything with at the time. Um, going right back to like uh, sort of late childhood before teenage years, um, and among the memories that we got back was remembering sort of in late high school years, um, having this sort of uncharacteristically visual mental experience of multiple people in our head, um, a man and a woman, and a or at the time we thought of it as a man and a woman and some other entity, um, who we now sort of like characterize as our best at the time understanding of all the bits of ourselves that we didn't enjoy or were afraid of, didn't like, the sort of the depression, the RSD, um, the inconsistency that we had with thinking sometimes. Um, that part is as best we can figure out what or was a metaphor, but the more masculine figure maps pretty well onto me, and the more feminine figure at the time mapped pretty well onto Lain. And what saw at the time was uh was Lain effectively fading back and not being around, and me coming to the front, and that's pretty much how we stayed for the next like 2.5 decades. Um, and so when we were, um, yeah, about a year and a bit ago, during HRT, during transition, presenting more feminine, trying out different styles, it was still me fronting at the time. We hadn't heard of plurality at all. We hadn't really had much context for examining that memory. Um, and there was a moment we were on the bus coming back from getting our ears pierced. Um, or I was on the bus coming back from getting my ears pierced. And um, there was this feeling that it still felt like an I was doing it thing, because when we switch, when someone takes over fronting, they become the new I. So I was on the bus, having like pretty pleased with how the piercing had gone, and then I took over from me, and at the time, sort of, we conceptualized it as taking apart the um, the part of our psyche that had been representing us as a more acceptable version of ourselves. Um, and over the next like 6 months or so, um, a few things happened. One, Lain was fronting pretty much full time. It's not, in retrospect, it probably wasn't entirely full time, but pretty much full time. Um, and we learned a lot about plurality from friends, from like other resources that people gave us. Met a bunch of plural people, and could immediately see like how that tied into the experiences we'd had, but we didn't feel like we were plural. Like Lain didn't feel plural; she was just being herself. Um, and the amount that we learned an awful lot from being quite close to Em and Liz as they um, discovered their own plurality and shared a lot about how they were feeling their process. Um, and from some of our other friends at the time who went through that process shortly after. And at this point, yeah, there was a piece of social drama that happened, and Lain had effectively a breakdown. Like, she had a really hard time. She was very worried about what was going to happen in her friendships, and one evening I found myself fronting and feeling like myself from, like, quote unquote before, and having very different sort of perspective on our relationships, on what I found amusing, entertaining, like right back, like it is like mentally jump back like 6 months. And over the course of that weekend, it became clear quite quickly that it was consistent with what people had experienced in terms of plurality. And from there, we just sort of slowly started to figure things out. And as mentioned earlier, might have been in the previous. It was definitely in the previous episode. It was to do with the its pronouns. I had been extremely depersonalized at the time, and since that happened, there's been a lot of me discovering who I am as a separate person from Lain, which has been really interesting, because when I started fronting again, it really wasn't clear that that was going to happen at all. Very much sort of felt like I was going to be this non-person entity still, with not a whole lot that I was interested in. And Lain would be the person who really had drive and interests. But now we both have our own sort of place in our life, and it works quite well.
Awesome. And let's see, we have M as part of Prismatic, who hasn't answered at all about the biography question, and I know that I think Liz wanted to circle back. Which of you would like to go next?
I'm
would,
fine with them going. Anything I might say is sort of building off of what they might.
Cool.
yeah,
She might.
either is fine for me, honestly. So, hi, I'm M from the prismatic system, and, I, uh, I, it's interesting sort of thinking about our system and our origins and, where we came from. And there's two terms that I would like to bring up here, which are traumagenic system and endogenic system. And the basis of this is a traumagenic system is a system that is ostensibly created through trauma, whereas an endogenic system is one that might evolve completely naturally outside of trauma. And there is a subset of the plural community that thinks that people claiming to be endogenic systems are faking, or that they don't have memory of whatever the trauma that they supposedly experienced was. And for us, it was sort of a mix, because I think that we probably had a bit of an endogenic system stuff going on to begin with, because back in the day, it felt a lot like there was more than one of us, except that at the time we were all more or less the same, so it was more like an 8-track video versus, a mono radio or something like that. Lots of different outputs of the same thing. But obviously, yeah, we did end up traumatized by life and life's compatriots. So we found out or figured out that we were trans somewhere between when we were 9 and when we were 11. It Yeah, a little bit of a content warning for kink stuff here. We have memories of going to our parents' computer in the middle of the night and then Googling with safe search off turned me into a girl. And of course, when you Google that with safe search off back in the early 2000s, you would tend to get some results that referred to a particular kink called forced feminization, which was our gateway to discovering that we were trans. And we probably shouldn't have been reading hardcore porn stuff at ages like that, but
I
it
actually have heard about that from a lot of trans people.
yeah,
I've heard that that's totally one of the sort
it's
of
pretty normal.
gateway experiences. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Thanks for normalizing that by sharing about it. Appreciate you.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, when you're a kid and you're looking for resources on things, and resources on those things either don't exist yet or are very yeah, not good or extremely obscure as they were at the time. I didn't know. We didn't know that you could be trans. The most we'd seen was a couple of drag queens, which wasn't exactly what we wanted to be, and our parents talking shit about a man who was having to be allowed to wear the nurse's uniform at the hospital for some reason, which, going back to that conversation later, it made it clear that that person was gender divergent from cis stuff. And uh yeah, so that was yeah, definitely a thing. So we came across that, but yeah. Our mum is she had a lot of abusive behaviors, some of which she's gotten better on. And she was very, very controlling of what we could do, what we could see, who we could interact with. And yeah, because of that, who we were was forced into. It's sort of like when you make a bonsai tree and you keep it small and you keep it looking how you like and growing how you like. And for a tree that can be nice because trees can be decorative and yeah. But when you try to do it to a person, it's not very good. um and I'm gonna go back because I see that somebody in the chat is saying that they have issues with the forced feminization kink. And yeah, that's fair. There's a lot of criticisms you could make of that kink. But yeah, that's what it was. It's what it is. I
I
think
mean, this is
people
why we need more
and
representation, right?
yeah.
Like in general,
I
we
think
just need more representation of trans and non-binary people in the media. Because
exactly.
then
So
people can
many of
have
them
more
are
discoveries
sexualized
that
and
are not
awful.
rooted in only sexual related things. Yes, Liz.
Sure. I figured I'd quickly say something on that as well before M continues. I didn't have the same experience that M had, but when you are living in a world that often tells you you don't exist, or that it's wrong to transition, or so many things like that, part of the appeal for many people of Force Femme is if it's not in your control, quote unquote, then it's okay. If you don't have the choice because it's quote unquote forced, then you're not responsible for it. And it's a way to explore that. So there absolutely are many of the sorts of issues you talked about or that M just brought up, but it's not without its value. And although that specific avenue wasn't so much one that we took, um, it was oddly enough the case that we read a lot of content that had that as a theme, and that was both helpful and played into the this is just a fetish thing for a long time. And it took some work
Hmm.
to tease those apart in the same way that so many trans people of any sort have the do I want to be them or do I want to be with them thing that generally is resolved as they begin to realize themselves. Um, and to take it a little further, like I started to show up a lot more when, and I guess this is where the CW for kink stuff comes up as well, is uh, the year that we realized we were plural is also the year that we started engaging some in what is called hypno kink. Um, the use of hypnosis in a kink context. You may have heard of, momification or all those sorts of things. And it so happens that when we engaged in that, I was the one that wound up fronting, and it took a bit to tease apart the fact that I tended to front when that sort of trigger was on, but I was not that. And it took a lot of work later once we teased that apart to be able to start fronting on my own in a real way, sort of like exercising a muscle, because I hadn't in a real way done so in such a long time that, you know, I guess building up some level of endurance. So I'm not saying there aren't I'm not disagreeing with you entirely, but I want to make sure that we note the benefits of that as well, which you seem to be acknowledging some in chat. I think I just looked and seen that. So yeah, back to you, Em.
Yeah. So continuing with our bio.
I wanted to
So
pause just for one moment
yeah,
because
great.
about 10 minutes ago in the text chat, Ian said that they are tired and want to go to bed. So I wanted to give Ian a chance to say goodnight to everyone and switch to Lain. And then we can hear the rest, M, of your bio, please.
Totally okay.
Awesome.
Works for me. Bye, Ian. See you
Yeah,
later.
Yeah, Ian. It
it's
was
been a
nice
lot of
hanging out.
fun, and yeah, I will. It's been nice reading the chat and everything. So I'll see folks around and let Lane show up.
Awesome. Good night, Ian. Thanks for being our guest.
Thanks, appreciate it.
I'm going to take this moment to remind folks that this is also a fundraiser for Elle's feminization surgery. The link is being posted regularly in the chat, and we appreciate any amount of money you are willing and able to give. You are supporting not only a trans person, but a trans person who is taking 3 hours on stream and countless hours before stream preparing to share all of this very juicy content with you. And Lain and M are also here supporting and engaging with Liz and the rest of Liz's system in this endeavor. So thank you so much, everyone, for showing up. I appreciate you dropping lurks, hanging out, talking in chat, and let's continue. Hi, Lain.
Hi,
Your hair looks really nice today.
Hey, Lain.
thank you.
Really?
It's they make fun of us actually sometimes for it because like we pretty much always do something like different with our hair, and it's not like some kind of plural way to differentiate ourselves. Is because like we kind of tend to get like a little bit of dysphoria out of the way that each other present. So like a lot of the time you'll be like, "Oh, um there goes the hair. Like here's Lane," or like the hair's going back, it's Ian. And yeah, it's kind of a nice shorthand in some ways, but it's not intended as that.
Awesome. I appreciate the visual indicator. I can also tell the way that your voice is and your entire body language has totally shifted, which is really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
People people pointed that out to us and we didn't know beforehand. Like particularly the body language thing was a big sort of shock to be like, "Oh, okay, that's really different then." And there's a physical sensation for us when we switch. There's like a feeling of sort of like pressure at different parts in our head that spreads, which again, even having Ian talked about how much we talk to people, even having done that so much, we really didn't expect a physical sensation that would mark things so clearly, which sort of gave us more of a pause, a moment to be like, okay, well, this is definitely something happening. This is not just like us pretending.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well,
When I
welcome to the
first got on
show.
with them. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I was just saying welcome to the show. Also, a reminder to our guests to
Thanks.
please hydrate.
When we first got on today, it was Ian, and we specifically didn't check the crystal heart they were using, and said, "Wait, don't talk." And I just like looked at the way they were holding their face. I was like, "Ian," it was like, "Bam, got it again." It's very stark. It's fun. Learning
We
new ways, noticing new ways, telling them new ways that there's that differentiation is, yeah, it's nice.
we have also been known for not actually realizing that we sound different when yeah. And obviously the differences can be different, especially if Harley's being serious. She'll tend to sound a lot more like me. Uh but yeah. I guess I'll continue with my bio. Uh
Please do. Thank you for your patience.
it's okay. Um so yeah, trauma, parental trauma, school trauma, we, neurodivergent, trans, plural, didn't really fit in. And we're we were as a gestalt, I guess, very tactile. Uh and I'm not now for trauma reasons. That came a bit later on. But um Harley uh sort of came about because we were forced to repress a lot of that tactile nature, a lot of that being very sort of huggy, cuddly, wanting to hold hands sort of things, that's seen in a lot of places as very unmasculine and something to stamp out. And while our parents didn't intentionally do that, they definitely gave those social signals. And our school did intentionally do that, and other kids' parents did, and other kids did, and so we repressed that part of ourselves, and over time, it gradually developed into Harley. And so as it stands, as we are aware, our first two system members were Harley and Alexia, and then another system member developed, who is no longer around. I'm her successor. But she was sort of the ablative shield version of us who had to go out and do everything and survive everything. And it's very much, yeah, it wasn't good for her. She ended up going through a lot, and it was not at all good for us. But at the end of high school, having gone through everything that we went through, and we were definitely suicidal at various points in there. Um, you know, hallucinating all sorts of things. It was a very traumatic time. At the end of high school, she sort of constructed me out of her ideals of what she wanted to be, and then just sort of fed me most of her memories and just disappeared, gone. In retrospect, it feels like I ended up eating bits of her, but like in a sense where I didn't have a choice. And it made me feel very much like a constructed persona. And I've had a lot of insecurity about that over the years. Because yeah, obviously I am real and I exist and I have my own likes and dislikes and uh so on. But it's if somebody else gave me those likes and dislikes, in a sense different from our bio parents instilling those in us, which was also traumatic to an extent because a lot of decisions, about who you are and what you like and what you get to do, and having to stay within those boundaries means that you sort of end up having to piece together who you are as a person later after getting out of that environment. And of course, we had to deal with the issues of trying to piece together who we were as a person while simultaneously being three people and not knowing it. So there was a lot of, oh, I definitely like this thing. I definitely do. We've bought things like this before. That means, we obviously have some liking for it. But yeah, I can't help but find myself really disliking this and just sort of put up a front until we liked it again. Um, that was in hindsight because I don't necessarily like the things that my headmates like. Um, so,
Wait, you put up a front?
oh
But
God, you
Carry on. I had
punny.
we like
Um,
we like puns around here. It's true.
yes,
We
but
have
she
an
also
emote
likes
for
when I
them and
get
everything.
exasperated with them.
Perfect.
Uh-huh. We
um,
make a good pair in that regard.
I do have a question to interject on that topic, if I
Mm-hmm.
may. If to your level of comfort, I wonder if your three systems would be open to sharing more with the chat/audience a bit about your relationships to each other. So this is sort of shifting into the gender and sexuality topics. Like I'm interested in talking about not only what it's like being in relationships, plural, many plurals go there, more puns, with each other, but also how different selves interacting with each other might impact your gender roles, if there are any, or have you deconstructed some of the gender roles? What is there aspects of oneself that brings out other pieces
I'm
in each other? All of these
actually
sorts of
about to get
questions.
there. Yeah,
Awesome. Cool.
actually about to get there from my bio because when Harley and Alexia uh realized for sure that we were plural. We were back living at our parents' place a year or two ago, which was not good for us and not a good time. And I was pretty adamant that we weren't plural. And I put up a big fight about it. And when we eventually did come out as plural, we had just started dating somebody, had only been dating for maybe a month or two. And that particular person is, as far as I know in the chat right now, she's lovely. She drew our avatar especially for this talk.
Awesome.
And she tends to draw out Harley some when she's around because they have fun punning and joking and doing silly voices and things. And it's fun to let them, because it's adorable. But I was still putting up a fight, and when Harley started fronting more often, it felt like she was taking over my life. And it sucked. And she, our partner, she was so good about it. She was so accepting and so comforting, that, we'd come out as plural. And she posted something really, really nice in the chat earlier about it. Which if you look for Gristly Giblets, who's just said "daw" there, if you scroll up at some point, if you're interested in that, yeah, she said something extremely sweet about acceptance and yeah, she's been so good and so understanding about plurality as we have all grown into ourselves more. And we do have slightly different relationships with her, but yeah. And then we're also dating L system, all of them. We weren't all dating L system initially, but as Harley fell more and more in love with them by proximity and seeing how extremely good and lovely they are, I did too, and so did Alexia. So it was definitely not an all at once thing, but I'm very glad for it. It's yeah, they're a bright spot in our lives. And then Lain is also very good and lovable. Love you, Lain.
Love you too.
Aw. Being all wholesome. I love it so much.
Thank you for. Oh, I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just gonna thank Em for saying that and seeing her face as she said it. It was really sweet, and it's yeah. We haven't had a relationship with someone since having our realization where both me and Em weren't involved. I'm not sure quite how we'd navigate that, but it definitely was a thing where Harley is the main front there, and it's her that we met first and interacted with most, and that did develop first and foremost, and then grew to a whole system thing. And our 6-month dating anniversary was yesterday, I want to say, and yeah, it was really really nice, and she's got a big grin on her face, so I had to say that too. I'm tattling, but yeah, I care about them massively. I love them an extraordinary amount, and yeah. Did you have more to say, Em, or should I move on to like more relationship stuff, like to say for me, or where you at?
I'm happy for you to move on to more relationship stuff. I sort of covered most of the general skip steps to, oh, I guess I missed one bit, which is that we did eventually start transitioning at age 19 after going through high school, knowing that we were a woman, but going to an all boys school, so that sucked a lot. But it happened. We're here, you know, and I'm told that we're quite pretty, so that's yeah.
That's true.
And thank you, and hello for the happy anniversary.
Yeah, thank you. The
Do
sort
go
of
on.
okay. So the interesting thing, that sort of like the flip side to that where it's like whole system, is that with Ian and Lain, it's not quite like that. Lain is I met Ian first when Ian was we met Ian first when Ian was still the main friend. And then that sort of transition that I think Ian mentioned happened where everyone, including them, thought, hey, Ian is transitioning and is now Lain before they had their pluralization and then got to know Lain really well until the realization occurred and they started to, you know, knowingly front separately. And a lot of things were clarified. And um, for us, it was pre our realization too at the start. So it was basically M and Ian, our M, our Emily, getting to know Ian, and then both of us getting to know Lain. And Lain is an incredibly dear friend that we care about so much that you know their system and the prismatic gals tell basically anything in the world, and we've leaned on Lain and vice versa, and there is absolutely the flirty and sexual element there that we've explored, and that's been lovely. And I can't say enough really lovely things about Lain in that way. And a while after, Ian started funny again in a way that showed us just the degree to which we are demi, which, for those that don't know, demisexual, it's on the ace spectrum. I guess a simplified way to put it is you don't really have sexual attraction without a specific uh, romantic or social bond, that personal bond, getting to know them, lets that blossom and bloom in a way that obviously um, people that aren't on that spectrum, there's obviously a deepening and stuff like that, but there just really isn't any of that for us, unless that's the case. And for us, we'll look at people and they will be attractive. They're pretty. They look nice. There is that, but these sort of visceral, like, oh, that person's really hot. There's like a visceral attraction. That's where that comes from. So when we got to know Ian better, uh, there was a certain dynamic that developed there that has been a bit of a through line with our other relationships, and that's different. That's more. There is that visceral, low level attraction with Ian, where we've gotten a little more involved there for sure, and um, that's been a little more difficult to navigate too, because obviously if you've got a partner and their headmate is incredibly close with them, but it isn't like if you have maybe a partner and a best friend that are coexisting separately, where you can talk to one and talk to the other, maybe even at the same time. One is there, the other is there, generally speaking, and that can be difficult to navigate. And sort of figuring out, renavigating that dynamic and elements with both Ian and with Lain, and figuring that out has been a real experience. But it's been a really lovely one, and I'm very grateful for having both of them in my life uh, as we've gone through that. I don't think I could say anything more without repeating myself, but love y'all a whole lot. So I'll pass things on.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Lain, do you want to chime in on this topic as a whole?
Sure. I could talk about being demi because it's something that we noticed about ourselves like in high school that um all of our friends would be like, oh, like look at the girls in the magazines, aren't they hot? Like, doing, horny teenage stuff. Um and it would make us uncomfortable. And you know, they'd make comments about um girls, people they were attracted to, and we would just kind of like didn't feel it. Um and when we did start dating, it was always friends, people who we were already close to that who we found attractive. And there are still like there are people who sort of like shortcut that for us, where like we kind of think, oh, well, that person seems like they would be like a good friend. Like it's sort of a brain trick where we're like, oh, like, hey, that person's style and the way they talk, that kind of thing, um, makes us think that we know them better than we do. And that either lasts or doesn't. And if it doesn't, then we tend to lose that attraction really quickly. Um, and there's also stuff we have going on where like if we're worried about like somebody getting offended or hurt by the way that we feel about them, our feelings tend to shut down pretty hard. But yeah, um, overall, it's been very, very clearly um, since a young age that we just are not don't have an interest in people unless we do have somebody put it really well in chat. I think it was in it hello again. That we have to have an emotional connection to someone before we can develop like romantic or sexual feelings about them. Um, yeah, and my feelings, I get feelings a lot more strongly than Ian does. They often don't really feel them sort of bodily at all. It's more of a uh, mental, emotional state that affects their thinking. But I get crushes really strongly, um, and all the time on people who I care about, and that's something that, yeah, that's the other side of it. It actually of being demisexual for me is that I get a lot of crushes, um, and learned very very early on that just because you got a crush on someone doesn't mean you have to have like or pursue a relationship with them. Um, you just let things go when they don't seem like something worth pursuing. Um, and yeah, I do want to address a question that came up in chat, which somebody asked, does that mean demi people don't consume porn? And it absolutely doesn't mean that, but it tends to mean that for me at least, that I have to either have porn that has a lot of context about the relationship between the people in the porn, like in the narrative there, um, or I have to do an awful lot of work myself to construct that um, for like on behalf of the writers and whoever created that piece of media in order for it to work for me.
Um, yeah, it's yeah. I don't think we have a lot of time left for this topic, but I think as a system as a whole, we are probably demi-romantic rather than demisexual. Harley's somewhat prolifically sexual. I'm to some extent more of an observer than not because I have sexual trauma. I have a large degree of touch aversion, and Alexia is somewhat sexual, but she's kind of inscrutable. So yeah. I think that I'm going to switch out at this point, and that will help with confusion if the other M happens to switch in. So it was nice talking to y'all, and thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Bye. And that works well
was nice
because
to
we
hang
were
out,
probably
Em.
going to switch in a minute. Go ahead.
So now we have multiple switches folks are wanting to do. So I will start to explain the next topic. But does Liz want to say goodbye, or have I just pulled you totally out of switching?
We're about to. Sure. I'll go ahead and say bye. Next time you hear us, it'll be and that's a lot more stark than from L to me, so you'll probably notice pretty quickly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hi, y'all. It is Holly again.
Hi, Harley. Welcome in.
Hi, Harley. Big Harley smile.
Switch here is done too. This is RM.
Hey, Em.
Hi, Em.
Hey, Em.
Love you.
My
Emmy.
inner
You too.
butch transbian toasts to your inner butch transbian.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a whole pile of things to talk about in our last 18 minutes. I'll tell you the topics. And so one topic is any advice on coming out. So there might be some eggs, if you will, in the chat. I've heard the eggs cracking all night. So if anyone has had an awakening during this, what advice do you want to give to them? There was a question about allyship, but I'm gonna backseat that if we don't have time, because I think we should focus on the eggs first. So we're gonna ask about eggs, and then and your coming out advice, if any, and then we're gonna ask for resources, and if there's time, we'll talk about allyship too. But first, eggs, the hatching.
Okay. I think one thing I want to say, in regard to X is you will probably have heard of multiple personality disorder and dissociative identity disorder. And something to keep in mind there is that those I would generally like pursue diagnosis only if it's like causing you lots of trouble, like if you've only just sort of had your egg cracked, because a lot of the psychological engine, especially in America and other places like that, with awful healthcare systems, has a lot of prejudice against people who fall under the umbrella of plurality. For example, the guy who was in charge of I guess let's define egg real quick too, which is it's a metaphor where you have an egg, you crack the egg, and then something else comes out of you having cracked that egg. So an egg is somebody who hasn't discovered what they are or what they might be or something like that is usually that sort of general thing. Yeah, it's worth noting that we shouldn't refer to specific folks as eggs because that can be quite rude, especially because like I had a friend in high school who his parents thought he was trans and kept trying to get him to come out, and then they thought he was gay and kept trying to get him to come out. He's just a really flamboyant cishet guy. Don't try and force people to partake in an identity that isn't, like does anyone else have anything to say on the topic of eggs before I continue talking about DID and MPD?
Maybe sort of tendentially for a second, and that would be
Okay.
you might even be about to touch on it, but just in case, if you do think you might be plural, or you are on that road, or you know someone, it's very important in a way that's even more so than with being trans, to a much greater degree, important to think about who you want to come out to. Most
Mm.
plural systems will not wind up coming out to the wider world.
Yeah.
Many will not come out to almost anyone at all. And coming out to a therapist, which I know Harley definitely will touch on, is also very fraught. I'm lucky enough that I was able to tell my therapist. I was able to tell some friends, beyond just some of these communities, and a parent as well. But that's not that common. I'm pretty privileged and lucky to have been able to. So yeah, there's a lot of misunderstandings out there in a way that I think Harley's about to touch on more.
Yeah. So there's this guy who I generally call that fucker. And when that is the epithet that you use to refer to somebody, you can usually assume that that person has a bunch of strong feelings towards them. And this particular guy, who was his name, I'm just double checking it to make sure I get it right, is Alan J. Francis, medical doctor. And he's got a lovely, lovely article on this Psychology Today. I guess it's a paper or something that has an online presence. And in 2014, he posted an article called Multiple Personality, Mental Disorder, Myth or Metaphor. Why multiple personality disorder fads come and go. Sorry, my voice is stumbling a bit because I'm getting a bit heated about this. And he is somebody who doesn't believe in multiple personality disorder, which is one thing. And I'm sure by extension he also doesn't believe in plurality at all, which is a whole other thing because like one of them's a diagnostic thing and the other one's a community. And he decided that because he didn't believe in it, he and his pals made sure that all the people who were on the panel for determining diagnostic criteria for dissociative identities of various sorts weren't on the panel for the next version of the DSM that he was organizing. And because of that, they were able to change the name and the diagnostic criteria from multiple personality disorder to dissociative identity disorder, which was meant to detract from its popularity as a diagnosis, but also makes it a lot harder to get a diagnosis. And a bunch of the materials that he's been a major part in sort of propagating makes it seem like it's not real. I dealt with somebody who is quite probably plural, who was an awful person, who blamed all of his issues on multiple personality disorder in 2013. And I didn't believe him at all because I searched up stuff and found this guy's articles, and that definitely stopped us from realizing we were plural for some time because we just didn't believe it existed at all. And so what I want to say about that fucker is don't listen to him. Don't listen to his friends. Like, he's he's awful. He's like the what's his name? Ray Blanchard of plurality. Um Ray Blanchard is if I'm getting the name right, an awful man. And the one behind what's it called? Something gender, autogenophilia.
Autobinophilia.
Yes, that's the one. And like, okay, it's okay for people to love themselves. Okay? Like, I want to put this out there right now. You are allowed to love yourself. There's this huge culture of self-deprecation and putting yourself down to make other people more comfortable. You're allowed to love yourself, and loving yourself as a trans person isn't that different to loving yourself as a cis person or an autistic person or an holistic person or people of any ethnicity loving themselves. It's fine. And so fuck that fucker and that other fucker is basically what I have to say on that topic. Um Yeah. So don't feel that you're awful if you think you're plural. You're not awful because you're plural. You know, like that's yeah. Anyway, I think that one of the others might want to go on because I've been ranting for a little bit.
I want to
Oh,
take a
Lain.
very quick opportunity to say, oh, M's fronting and the hair's gone up. Because I never get to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, the slight antagonism.
Now I completely forgot what I was going to say. Don't enjoy yourself too much. I'll get you there.
I have a brief question. Does clinical integration come across similarly violent to y'all as conversion therapy is to like lesbian, gay, bi, pansexual folks?
If it's forced.
If it's forced. Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. I figured that would be a quick answer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's if it happens, like both I and Liz and myself, if that happens, in the sense of if we were to integrate, that's fine. We thought that might have even happened the first time that we did the whole L thing, and we weren't sure that we hadn't until we resolved again, so to speak. We went through stages at first of like, wow, being plural is really going to complicate things. This sucks. And we've come to a place where like it is possible to be plural and be dysfunctional. And it is possible for that dysfunction to be related to your plurality. And it is possible for that dysfunction to not be related or both. And in our case, it's a very synergistic thing. Being plural has been good for us. Our aims are the same, our goals are the same. We are happy to be. And if we happen to find ourselves that we integrated, sure. But the reason we were so scared to talk to our therapist about it, if it wasn't for the fact that a friend had already done so, is that it's not that unusual to go to a therapist and have that be exactly what they go to. That's the advice that's so often given is, oh yeah, just integrate. And
That's
not
part
only
of
is it
that
not helpful,
fucker's advice.
it's actively harmful generally. And even if you are quote unquote successful in doing that by force, it doesn't usually stick. Usually wind up worse off. It's yeah.
It's like
Integration itself is not
detransition.
inherently bad, but yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
Most detransitioners are still trans, but society is so awful to them, and often therapists and people are still awful to them too, depending on where you live and who you get.
I would say, like, yeah, there definitely are, like, good therapists for plural people in the same way that there are good therapists for trans people. And we were really lucky to have a therapist who was super accepting and was not, didn't have any, like, goals to try to mess with our plurality in any way that we didn't, like, want. She's never even, like, brought up, like, hey, do you want to change this? Um, but that's not everybody's experience by a long way. Like, it definitely does seem pretty common for therapists to sort of latch onto being like, oh, well, here's something to fix.
Yeah. Yeah, advice to eggs. If you are working out that you're plural and you need advice and you needed help, I would either reach out to something that you can do anonymously. Some phone self-help lines will do that, because that has less consequences than coming out directly to your therapist, or reach out to the wider plural community, because like one of the problems with just immediately coming out as plural is that people will very much see you a certain way, and that way is colored by representation in media, which is usually pretty awful and abysmal, and also colored by that fucker's work. And sorry, I was meant to try and not call him that, but um, colored by Ellen J. Francis MD's work. And so just please be careful, keep yourself safe. And you know, if you have questions, many, many plural people out there are happy to answer you and help you. You might have heard of hashtag plural gang. That's a good place to look if you're still, questioning and you want to read other people's experiences.
Awesome. Our last handful of minutes here, I would like to invite us to pivot towards resources. There's a number of questions I have about it, and I also want to have a little bit of spaciousness around discussing resources. I think it's important to do it justice. So first, is can you recommend any diagnostic resources for questioning folks? Like if there's any self-identified, not us identified, but self-identified eggs in the chat who are starting to feel the hatch happen, is there somewhere they can go read or look or learn about some of this stuff? And I know we have a whole list of resources that we generated before the show. I just wonder if there's anything additional that we maybe haven't brought up yet.
Yeah, I brought up hashtag plural gang. That was a popular hashtag wellspring in the last couple of years. I think it came up on one of H Bummer Guy's streams. Somebody came out as plural, and then it sort of sparked a mass coming out. So like things tagged with that, you're gonna get some mixed results, of course, but things tagged with that on Twitter, you might find some helpful resources in there. There's also a Plurality Mastodon, which again you might get mixed results, but it's a community space, and even if you don't actually join it, there's a page with links to resources on it, and that's at plural.cafe. So that's a useful one.
Awesome. Okay,
That that's
I'll add
yeah.
the Twitter hashtag to the list. The Mastodon thing was on there already.
Mm-hmm.
Would someone like to take a moment to explain what Plural Kit is and how it works and why someone might choose to use it or not? Yeah. M?
Sure. Plural Kit is a bot for Discord, which utilizes Discord's webhook functionality, to use the technical term, to allow plural systems, the headmates of those systems, to speak in the chat individually, to be distinguished. The only limitations, so to speak, I guess there's two at this point, are A, the name shows up uncolored as white, that may get fixed in the future, and B, that they all have the bot tag on them. Normally, that feature is used by bots to, I don't know, show a feed for Twitter, YouTube, RSS feeds, things like that. In this case, it just generates an entry for each headmate of a system that wants to do so. It stores info about each one that you can look up that is associated with the system and the account, the base account of that system. You can associate pronouns, other descriptions, things like that. It can be really helpful. A few days ago, they finally added an editing functionality, which was pretty big. I don't use it, really. I don't find it super useful for us. Our switches are pretty quote unquote stable in the sense that one of us runs for a while and later someone else does. But there's plenty of systems where it's more rapid or people are getting in words here and there. And it's a lot more useful there. And especially because editing wasn't available till recently. We edit all the time. We're anxious, and we didn't want to give that up. Now, it's just mostly, it's still more work than it's worth, especially if you're an admin or a mod on the server. You don't have the name color, you don't have your roles. So it's useful for a lot of people, and I encourage servers that are aware of it to add it. I've had it added to servers that I can have that done on. But obviously, the choice of whether or not to use that is up to an individual system.
Yeah, we don't tend to use that. There's also one that I forgot to mention earlier, which is pluralevents.org holds some conferences and things which give interesting information and sometimes even history and things on plurality and related concepts. So that's worth checking out.
Is that one typed? Yes, it is. Awesome. Great.
So, we didn't have any plans really to use Pluralkit once we started finding it available to us, but we do find ourselves dipping into it pretty often nowadays. Mostly in contexts where we want to like leave some amount of context over who was fronting during a conversation, um, or in cases where um, we've had like thoughts, something that we want to put down that is clearly from the other headmate, like an interjection, effectively. We'll tend to use plural kit in both those cases to make it clear in the course of the conversation, like who was active at what parts. But then we'll usually do most of the rest of our posts just with our regular account.
Awesome. There are a number of other links and resources that folks can use to go read more. I'll be happy to post that in the chat in a minute. But are there any other resources that you all have in this thread that you would particularly like to highlight before we wrap up for the evening?
Let me just take a quick squiz it again. Did we end up talking about the alternative to Pluralkit? And the downsides of that or upsides of that? Okay, that might be something to go into another time then. More than
What is
one
it
dot
called?
info. I don't remember.
Okay.
One
It's
or the other.
upper box.
What
Some
was
people
that?
take issue with the naming because it is a reference to the terminology of tulpas, which the concept of which I have no issue with, but the phrasing, the terminology is sourced from stuff that can be seen as cultural
What's it called again,
appropriation.
sir? Didn't quite
Tupper
come
box.
through. Tupper box. I see.
Up until now, for a while, it had the editing feature, while Pluralkit didn't. That's no longer the case. It's fine. I prefer Pluralkit for a lot of different reasons, personally.
More than one dot info hashtag myths has some good like little snippets there for people who are new to plurality and want to know more about how to interact with them. There's also an etiquette page, which yeah, it's not like overly complex stuff. It's mostly just like because as we were all saying earlier in various different words, no plural system is a monolith of what plurality is or what plurality means. So it's mostly sort of general stuff that works well for most people. I think those are all the links I have to highlight anyway.
Okay. People are asking for the link in chat, and I will do that in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And does anyone else want to weigh in on resources before I invite Elle to share the short link and possibly plug another community that we have been typing about over there in the private chat?
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, I thought you were asking if anyone else had anything before that, so I was just waiting. Sorry.
It's all good.
If you do want to donate, whether you're listening now or if you're on a podcast listening to that in the future, because people don't read descriptions, or if you're watching the VOD later, the GoFundMe link itself is gofund.me/D as in dog, A as in apple, 3, C as in cat, F as in fox, 4, E as in elephant, A as in apple. So that's gofund.me/D A 3 C F 4 E A. And if you're watching this later on Twitch, you can see it having streamed in the chat. You can find it in the descriptions if you do look for it. Yeah, and we'd all appreciate anything that you're willing to do. And in this case, that all is not just our system, that is also our lovely partner and our girlfriends and our very, very dear friend Lain that we take care of so much. So yeah, I think that's that.
I'm so glad that we were able to get the ball rolling on this for their birthday because, like, dang. And
Yeah.
I'm really grateful to Gender Meowster for having invited us to their stream because this has actually been a lot of fun. And I'm also very grateful to everyone who came along to listen and paid attention. Yeah. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much for coming.
Started as a joke late night. Harley asked what we wanted for our birthday. We were like, this would never happen, but
Like, it could happen.
On the topic of things happening or not, our update on how this fundraiser has gone, at least during the live portion, we have raised $190 in the last handful of hours. And I know there are some people who donated
Right.
before stream just because of all the promotion that we did. And I do hope that our listeners at home continue to consider contributing to this very worthwhile cause. If you learned something, it's very easy to send $5, $20, $50, or $100 into the GoFundMe. I think it will be up and available for several weeks to follow this recording. So it looks like Em would like to chime in.
If for some reason GoFundMe doesn't work for you, I don't want to volunteer. Jack, if someone wanted to like do PayPal or something like that, I could pass the links through you. That happens to be relevant. Okay to...
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Any way
But
someone can get a hold of me, I'm happy to connect folks. Is there another community you would like to plug here at the end of our show? I also see that Harley has a hand raised.
Oh.
Or you were
That
stretching.
was,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was stretching, but I do have a my lovely girlfriend who I talked about earlier, who drew this profile picture, occasionally does commissions, and you can find her on Instagram at JLB illustration, which I'll paste in the chat. That's her username there.
I'll build off that. I'll build off that by saying that the image you see for me was drawn specifically for this GoFundMe by my friend B, who's very dear to me. That presumably you'll be watching this tomorrow. If you want to potentially try to commission something out of her, that's how she's making her money. Her Twitter is skulls, but the L's are ones, so SKU11S. And you can potentially reach out to her through that.
And I don't have anyone to plug for my art because I took that photo myself. But I, yeah, if anyone wants to come hang out with us, for, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but if anyone wants to come hang out with us,
Because you're all awesome, all 7.5 of you.
Thank you. And there's a condition, and you're explicitly anti-capitalist, you can come check out our community Left Home at lefthome.info and come join that community. We're a pretty cozy place, we're told by our members, and it's been a place that has been really important to me in my life, and that's why I spend so much time there. And at some point took a position on staff. It's been a really great place for our life in general.
When you join, you will see that there's a thing where you sort of get onboarded. You get asked some questions. Don't be scared. It's just checking some things like the capitalism stuff, some ableism stuff, like like Lain just mentioned. And yes, absolutely fuck capitalism. The person that just
Yeah.
asked for that. Yeah.
As a final yes, left home is great thing. If there are folks who are still listening, thank you for hanging until the end. If you have enjoyed some of the community guidelines or rules or offerings that we've done around casual ableism, like deconstructing casual ableism and casual oppression. So that takes ableism and expands it out into anti-racism and other forms of oppression that we have accidentally in our language, as well as different things around best practices with content warnings and all of those things to keep our community feeling much more secure and cozy. A lot of those have been modified from some of Left Home's community guidelines with the participation and consent of the Left Home mod team, primarily Elle, which is, like that's some of that secret super no one ever sees the work, but Elle has been around for like almost a year at this point, really deeply supporting the community with some of the core tenets and pieces of what we're doing. So once more, thank you everyone who's donated and who is going to donate. Thank you to our guests for showing up and sharing so openly and deeply about yourselves. I'm going to give you all a moment here to say goodnight while I look for someone for us to go raid.
Yeah, like I said before, thank you all for coming so much. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being so understanding of some of the topics we talked about. And fuck those two fuckers and fuck capitalism. Good night.
Yeah. Good night. It's been really fun dipping into chat. And yeah, it's been really lovely to have a venue to talk about this and hopefully spread some amount of the knowledge and awareness that we've gained in trying to figure ourselves out.
I'm just switched out. I wanted to switch in to do the goodbye because I'm about to. So I don't know. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for
Bessie.
watching. For everyone that donated, hi. Everyone that did donate, may donate, will donate. I hope that you're able to learn stuff from this. I hope that you do consider checking out Left Home. That you continue to watch Jack stuff. They're lovely.
It's very
That's
true.
it. Yeah.
They're very good and very sweet.
Oh,
And
Very
special
a
extra
major
shout
fan
out
of
bless you.
to
Hans.
Mirami. I hope I pronounced it right this time. Mirami.
You did.
For
I think so. Yeah.
for moderating this, and yeah,
Helping
Mirami's
us
great.
on the back end.
Very kind. Well, thank you, guests. I'm going to take a moment to say good night to chat, and I would love to check out, like, speak with you in a checking out after stream manner for just a few moments, just to make sure everyone's feeling good. So if you wouldn't mind hanging out for a few more minutes, but feel free to have a bio or have a water or whatever you need right now. Again, chat, thank you so much, so much for being here. It has been such a delight and a pleasure and an honor. I am truly touched for all of your solidarity showing up. Thank you to the leftists. Thank you to the communists. Thank you to the trans folks. Thank you to the plural folks. Thanks for the comrades. Thanks for the cat lovers and everyone else in between. It has been such a delight and a joy. I could just cry. Really, truly, thank you so much. The GoFundMe will continue to run, and if not this moment, then consider any sort of trans mutual aid in the future. I know there will come a day when I may need to do this for myself, and it's like the trans community is just passing around the same $20. We just support each other when it's your turn, and it's really beautiful when we all come together to self-actualize and support each other. So thank you again. I'm totally tearing up right now just talking about it. The streamer that I've selected for us to raid, I looked them up on peertopeer.live, which, if you don't know, is a directory of diverse streamers that's based on identity, including gender, sexuality, ethnicity, ability, and more. So I've found a streamer who identifies as plural, who also identifies as queer, non-binary, pansexual, trans, a woman, feminine, lesbian, furry, VTuber, has anxiety, and identifies as atheist or agnostic. So we're going to go say hello to a streamer that I haven't met before, but I'm looking forward to meeting, called Mini Celeste. And it looks like the viewer count is 33, so that's about similar to this, about 10 more than what we've got now. So it's a good-sized community to raid into. They won't be too, hopefully not too surprised and shocked by it. Oops, wrong buttons. I'm going to do some, I still have to fix that one, some raid commands here. If you would like to copy paste this into the chat, if you hang out for the raid, friends, instead of going to sleep right this minute, you get some extra channel points, which we didn't have a lot of channel point redemptions tonight because I turned everything off so we could stay focused. But if you come back 11 to 2 weekdays, Monday through Thursday, or 6 to 9 p.m. usually on Wednesdays, I have a lot of other content for you. My flagship show is Genderful, which is this talk show that you've been listening to now. It usually airs on Mondays from 2:30 to either 3:30 or 4:30, depending on the guest preference, if we want to do 1 or 2 hours. And we talk about gender and different identities. So we've had a lot of folks on talk about like gender abolition, and coming up next week, we actually have folks who are trans eggs and baby trans, and like we also have a trans elder. My wife, Trans Capybara, will be on stream. And so we just talk about gender and all kinds of other topics, and it's a lovely time. There's a lot of learning that happens, and if you are an ally to the trans community, this is one way you can teach yourself more. It's an intentional space we've created for these questions and for this sort of learning experience. So thank you all so much, and we'll catch you next time.